Hi, hello, hey, and welcome to my tent, a place to hear life experiences, different opinions, a range of journeys, and a viewpoint different than our own. A place to challenge our own thoughts, a space to learn a little bit, and I promise some fun along the way. I believe we're better when we let a range of people into our tents, so welcome to mine. Did you know that our health is encompassed by way more than just food and fitness? Did you know I'm a health coach? What is a health coach? I can tell you. I work with individuals and groups to look at all aspects of life that help make us truly well. I have structured programs to help you create realistic, challenging but achievable, and long-term transformations that span long past our time working together. I help you take a multifaceted approach to your health, ranging from food, fitness, relationships, work-life balance, financial health, gratitude and joy, creativity, career, and more. If you are looking to make a health transformation, visit my website in the show notes or email me, sarah@sarahjohnstonwellness.com. Cheers to good health. Hello, hello. We have Natasha Dworkin, who is the Midlife Mom on social on her site. And she does a lot of work with changing lives. And a lot of that spurs from her story of her motherhood journey and her pregnancy journey and how that all unfolded. And we're definitely going to get a lot more into that. But if you just want to give a quick hello and a brief intro, that would be awesome.
Hello. Yes, I am midlife mama, but I was not always midlife mama. As the word midlife implies, I had a whole chapter
Yes.
prior to being a parent, right? So I had a very rich and varied and really interesting life before becoming a parent. And that season of my life, so basically the first 45 years of life, were very much about making change in the world. I am the daughter of social justice warriors, many generations back, and sort of grew up in this context of responsibility toward making a difference in the world. And that was always the ethos in my family. And so I went into work ultimately that allowed me to help people make change in their lives and communities and the world. And then I guess sort of ironically, after working for, 25 years in that field of change making professionally and also just socially in my personal life, everything changed for me when I became unexpectedly pregnant at the age of 46, which is very unusual.
Yes.
There are,
yes.
many women having children older and, later in life, particularly on the coasts and more populous places. That's not too unusual anymore to see women over 35, which used to be considered,
geriatric. Oh my gosh. That also needs to, I guess what do they call it now? Advanced maternal age or whatnot, but
not much better. Yeah.
Yeah. No, neither of those, which are great.
Yeah. 46 is even beyond, what is considered to be part of the sort of normal range of later in life motherhood.
And especially because you were once previously told, I believe in your 20s, that having biological children was not an option for you, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. I was diagnosed very young in my early 20s with polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is a syndrome. So it has a breadth of different symptoms, but one of which can be infertility based on anovulation, not ovulating. And that was a symptom for me. I didn't ovulate. And if you don't ovulate, right, you can't get pregnant.
Yep.
So I was always told by doctors that I wasn't going to get pregnant naturally because I just wasn't ovulating. I was also told that if I decide I wanted to have children, I could employ scientific intervention, right, to help me, to assist the ovulation. But I never found myself in a relationship where I wanted to. That's a big step. It's a big financial step. It's a big move to make in a relationship, to go down that road, which can be arduous and expensive and emotionally draining. And I never was in quite the right relationship. So while I always sort of thought I would have kids eventually one day, that factor of knowing I was going to need help to do so, and never quite finding myself in the right relationship where I wanted to go down that road, led me to a point in my 40s, early 40s, where I just thought, okay, I think that's not what's in store for me in this
Yeah.
go round. in this,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my son's an IVF baby, so I know that road
Mhm.
deeply. And it is one that is, like you said, financially, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, all of the things. So I'd also love to hear your perspective because, like you said, you had an extremely rich, beautiful life for 45 years. And in a lot of ways, while our future is never completely known to us, was there this sense of, okay, this is who I am, this is what we're doing? You kind of feel like you're set and then you find out at 46 that you are pregnant with your son. So, what was that kind of juxtaposition of, okay, I thought I had this settled, now I don't. And what's going to happen from here? What was that period like during that time?
Yeah. It was big. I mean, I think when you have a child early in your 20s, you're still sort of growing and developing yourself. So you end up doing that in tandem with becoming a parent and in parallel in some ways with your child's development. So there's room for sort of co-development, right? When you find yourself pregnant, whether intentionally or unintentionally, as in my case, in midlife, you are very established in who you are. You're a lot more established. And that can be great. It can also be really challenging. You can be very set in your ways. You're sort of set in your routine and the way you do things. And that can be harder to turn that ship than it is when you're in your 20s. For me, I was very satisfied with my life before having a child. I had really resigned myself to not having children, and I had really embraced the role of being an auntie to my nieces and my nephew and being a dog mom. I mean, honestly, my dog was my
Yes.
first baby. Yeah. And I felt pretty settled. I think there was a part of me that was disappointed that I wasn't going to be a mom in this particular life. But I also wasn't held back by that. It was like, let's make the most of this. That's not what's happening for me, but so much more stuff can still happen. And I was dating a lot, online dating, and, kind of happy not being pinned down in a long term relationship, though I had been in longer term relationships in my life. But at that particular time, I wasn't. And I think I just felt while I didn't have a crystal clear vision of what the future would look like, I had a pretty clear understanding of myself as someone who loves to travel, who loves adventure, who loves to be in the outdoors. And so I knew that whatever the future would look like, specifically, it would involve those things. I'd be traveling, I'd be outside, I'd be hiking and climbing and backpacking and sailing and, adventuring around the world, whether by myself or with whoever I was dating or with friends or whatever. And, um, that felt very natural for me. I've always been really independent. I'm an only child. So that just felt like home for me. So back to your question, when I found out I was pregnant, for one thing, the first thing was just total disbelief
Mhm.
because I mean, the belief, Sarah, the disbelief was so extreme that I really thought that the doctors didn't know what they were talking about.
You're like, you are wrong.
When the nurse called to tell me that the pregnancy test was positive, I was like, it's not possible. And I think you need to get your facts straight because that can't happen. I'm 46 and I'm not fertile. I don't ovulate, like that can't happen. And I really convinced myself that I had this thing where you can have a cyst in your ovaries that's releasing HCG, the pregnancy hormone.
Yeah.
And I had such high levels of HCG that I was like, well, that's not even normal. I mean, that's so high. The nurse thought I could possibly be pregnant with twins.
Oh
And
my gosh.
I was like, well, clearly that must be wrong because that's not even normal and I can't get pregnant. So I must have one of these cysts. But then I had an ultrasound and I saw this little tiny being. And that is a moment that will go down in history as just one of the defining moments of my life. Seeing that on the screen and just in that moment, really understanding that everything was going to change, everything. And
Yeah.
it did. It really did.
And here you are.
Yeah. And then, back to your question, I think the evolution or sort of the birth of the mother in me has taken many years. And my son is almost 5. And honestly, I think I have settled into this role, but the transition is ongoing. It's
Mhm.
a big shift from one chapter into a completely divergent one that was unexpected and unplanned and scary, and also very exciting and thrilling and fulfilling and, miraculous. So all of those things happen at the same time. And it makes for a real jumble of emotions and, feelings and experiences. And I think I'm still sort of making my way through that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think all mothers, it's always an evolving journey, especially because these little ones change so fast and you're trying to keep up with their evolution as well. And I think what's also really beautiful is you do have such valuable, rich life experiences. That is, in my opinion, a benefit to bringing to motherhood, where if you do have a baby in your early 20s, I think about when I was like 22, 23, I was a child. I was a baby.
Yeah.
Who I am now is very different than who I was back then. So I feel like that is such a beautiful thing to be able to bring to your son. So during the time that you were pregnant, did you have a hard time wrapping your head around it the entire time? Like because it's a long kind of 10 months. What was that pregnancy journey for you like before he was earthside?
Yeah. Well, just like every other element of this experience, it was a mixed bag. I mean, it
Mhm.
was being pregnant is one of the most incredible feelings that a woman can have in a life. It's also incredibly vulnerable. I don't think I've ever felt more vulnerable than when I was pregnant. You are literally protecting and caring for another life, and that it feels very, very intensely vulnerable. And it's just beautiful. It's just a beautiful thing to experience the changes in your own body and to see your body in a new way. And I've always had a little bit of a belly, even since I was a little kid. And that was the first time where I felt like my belly made sense and I felt like it was beautiful. And yeah, just there were things like that. There just felt so, there was such wonder and awe. But at the same time, I was also in a relationship now with my son's father, who we had not been in a relationship before I got pregnant. We had been not exclusively dating. So here we were trying to find our way through this new path to people who never planned to be together,
Mhm.
that found themselves sort of thrown together by this new life. And, we chose to, whether intentionally or not intentionally, or consciously or subconsciously, we chose to sort of stay together through that journey. We never broke up and said we're going to do this separately, or it was always clear to me that he was going to be part of the picture and I wanted him to be. But that the pregnancy and the relationship between us, we were in therapy while I was pregnant. It was fraught. So it was a time that was beautiful and miraculous for me personally, but fraught in my relationship with my now partner, who did not want to have children and
Mhm.
found himself feeling trapped in a future that he hadn't envisioned and didn't want for himself. So we were dealing with all of that at the same time. And he was, I think he was really grappling with his own emotions and actually feeling angry towards me. So we were working through a lot of that stuff in therapy together. It was, both miraculous and beautiful and wonderful, and also very fraught and very scary and vulnerable all at the same time.
Mhm.
And maybe it is always those things, no matter your age, maybe, but for me, that's what it looked like.
Yeah. Yeah, you were basically like turbocharging and speeding through a lot of different life things that people tend to do in pieces. People tend to do the dating, then the wedding, and
Right.
then so you really
Yeah.
just went full steam ahead on that. But I'd also love to hear your experience in the way that society has maybe spoken to you or treated you. I mean, I do not agree with it, but society, for pretty much everything that you do, has deemed certain timelines acceptable. So while you were pregnant or with, your young child, what were some of the experiences that you had out in the world as someone that wasn't necessarily on the traditional quote unquote time frame as other people?
I love that question. And I think I think so many women, in the time since I had my son, I've started this Facebook community called Midlife Mamas. And, we're now 2,000 or so strong women who all had children over the age of 35. And it's something that we talk about a lot in that group. And that is an experience that's shared even amongst women who really planned and tried for a long time to have
Mhm.
children. So whether it's an accident, in quotes, or whether it was planned, this reality is true for all of us, that we're treated differently. We're treated differently by the medical establishment. We're treated differently socially, in our orbits, in our own personal lives, and that takes a toll, and it has an effect on us. So a couple examples, in my personal life, when people found out that I was pregnant, there was this assumption that I had always wanted to have a child and that I was finally getting my wish. Even people who have known me for a long time and who I've known, and there was this sense of elation of just like, oh, it's like such an incredible miracle that Natasha's finally going to have a family and a child. And people showed up in droves for my baby showers, people who have known me my whole life in the community where I grew up, which was lovely and really generous and amazing. But it didn't feel only like a miracle and like an elated sort of period of time for me. Like I said, it was really mixed. There were a lot of contradictory emotions going on for me. And in some ways that made me feel like, how well have any of these people really known me? Because it's not like I've always been longing for this and I finally got it and we have to rejoice. This was an accident and it
Yep.
wasn't something I planned. So it just kind of felt like that was a societal expectation that an older woman who hasn't had a child yet has been let down or disappointed, and that now if she's having one and it's this incredible surprise, and isn't it a miracle? So that was one sort of piece of evidence of the way that mainstream society views older women without children. Um, Another thing that happened on the medical end for me was I was immediately channeled into the high risk category. And I was sent by my primary care provider right off the bat to a high risk clinic in my local hospital system. And thank goodness I had a doctor there who saw me once and did some exams and, took a look at me and took all of the vitals and all that stuff. And then on my next visit, he said, I don't think there's a reason for you to be here. And
Mhm.
I think what you should do is think about the kind of birth you want to have. Because if you stay here with me, you're going to have a high risk labor and delivery, and that's going to look a certain way. And you might not want that for your birth of your child. And there's nothing high risk about your pregnancy. You're totally healthy. There's
Yeah.
no reason for you to be here under my care where we're going to funnel you into this very particular kind of birth. So you should go home and think about what a fulfilling and meaningful birth looks like for you, and make your own choice about what kind of caregiver to make a relationship with based on that. And I'm to this day so grateful that that doctor, you know, channeled me in that direction, because I didn't get the birth I wanted necessarily. And I did end up having some complications during my birth, but it just felt like someone saw me as a human being, not
Yep.
just a 46-year-old person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I felt seen in a way that, like you've said, the sort of greater mainstream medical establishment doesn't tend to see women like me. And there's the issue of litigation. I think a lot of, it's sort of endemic in all of areas of our healthcare system, where doctors just don't want to take any chances, and so they end up treating someone as high risk because they don't want to take any chances
Yeah.
when that person might not technically be high risk. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love that doctor for actually seeing you as an individual person. And it
Yes.
is really interesting that what you were saying about people kind of assuming when this happens to someone, however they got there, it almost feels like they expect that to be the sole reason that person should be, or that's the sole job they have. And
Yeah.
a lot of what I work through and struggle with is I am a mother, but a mother is not all that I am. I mean, we are such amazing people, yes, I mean, being a mother is a huge part of my work and my job and my life, but it's also okay to separate those things and be other things within that as well. And I think it's really important to have conversations like this, because if we are to interact with someone, we now know, like, oh, there's so much more that goes on behind this. And they're not just now this miraculous thing and the only thing they want to talk about and their only identity is now being a mother, because
Mhm.
that's not true. That's not just who we are. And I know you do a lot of work, and you're big into the change makers and your community of change makers. And a lot of this seems fueled by both your upbringing and also this big pivotal life moment. So how are you working with clients, and what are your messages that are going out, whether it be writing, authoring, podcasting, things like that? Like, what is the emphasis behind change making and using these big life things to do good and put good into the world?
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for asking. So, for a lot of years, for a couple of decades, I worked with what I call purpose driven organizations. So, nonprofit organizations, educational institutions, labor unions, government agencies, organizations, and entities that are just that have a social purpose, that are doing something good in the world. And I founded an agency in 2008 to do that work, to help those kinds of organizations tell their stories. So, a strategic communications agency, to help them tell their stories with the mission of helping them um, make progress toward their vision more effectively by telling their stories in a more compelling way and better connecting with their stakeholders. And in doing that work, I developed a process to help them measurably advance their organizational mission towards their envisioned goals, right? And so I work one on one with many of the executive directors or agency heads that I work with in the various organizations that I work with, to help them sort of craft and implement a really clear vision of change, and then plot out the steps that they need to take in a really steady, measured way in order to make progress toward that change. And I've been doing that for a lot of years. And along the way, I've run this agency. So we're helping them tell their stories along the way. And when everything changed for me, I think that work, that in my deep roots in helping others execute monumental change, right? Really, it took a while, but after a while, after some foundering and wondering, how am I going to navigate this? And how am I going to, this is just, crazy and unknown. At some point, I thought, I know how to do this. I mean, this is what I
Hmm.
do, right? I see through people through change, through significant change, and I help them to harness their skills and leverage their abilities and their assets in order to make the change that they want to make proactively, so that they're not sort of accidentally stumbling into change, but proactively making the change that they want to see happen in the world. So I sort of employed my own tools on myself. And it starts with starting at the end and really thinking about what success looks like for you. And that's how it starts with my organizational clients. And now it's how it happened for me, with really
Yep.
thinking, if I'm going to bring a child into the world at this age and in this relationship and in this chapter of my life, what does that need to look like to be fulfilling and meaningful and successful and effective for me and for my child and for my partner? What will that look like? What will be the indicators of success in the way that I define it now at this point in my life? And I was able to, sort of turn this ship and make these big changes. Of course, over time, slowly over time, and not without obstacles and not without, a lot of challenges, but able to get to a point where today I really am living a life that is aligned with my values, that where I feel like I'm being the model of the kind of person I want my child to see their parent be. And I feel like I'm creating a legacy for my son that he will be proud of
Hmm.
ultimately in the end, which is where I wanted to be, right? That's where I wanted to end up. And I'm always continuing to work on all of the things that carry that ball forward. But at some point, I realized that I'm not the only one who gets to midlife, whether it's, because of whether the catalyst is a midlife pregnancy or a need for a career change or a relationship change happening at midlife, I'm not the only one who gets to midlife and goes, I need change, or everything is changing and it feels like chaos and I don't know how to get my arms around it and shape it into something that ultimately leads me to a better version of myself, an optimal version of myself. And so I shifted my organizational work to instead, or actually to also, because I'm still working with some organizational clients, to also work with individual women who have found themselves, for whatever reason, at a similar point in their life cycle where they either want big transformative change in their lives, where they go, I'm at midlife and I'm not where I thought I would be, and it doesn't look like I wanted it, and I want something different. Or where they think I've had a rich, amazing, incredible life, but I know there's more, and I want to be more fully myself. I want to be more fully realized in my next chapter. Or they find themselves at a particular crux, like it's a career thing where they know I've been working along with my wheels in these wagon ruts for 20 years now, and now I'm at midlife and I'm realizing that this isn't what I want to do in the world. And
Mm-hmm.
how do I pivot, right? How do I change once I'm so established on that track? So I took the same tools that I've been using with organizations for years and years and sort of rejiggered them and reimagined them to work with individual women. And now I help individual women both in a one-on-one coaching context and also through my courses to make and sustain transformative change in their lives, with the ultimate goal always being more fully realized for who they are and being their, most deeply authentic selves.
Yeah. Do you find that, or is it evenly split, like sort of the percentages in range? People are coming to you because there's a catalyst, or people are coming to you because they want to be the catalyst? So, like, are there more people coming, like with your example of, I'm 46 and I'm having a baby, or are a lot
Yeah.
more people coming to you like, I'm not really sure why I'm feeling this, but I need to change?
Yeah, I think it's the second. The second.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more of there's what I hear so often is people using the word more, saying, I just want something more. Like, and a lot of times women in particular will say, I don't want to seem ingrateful for what I have. Like a lot of my clients and the students in my courses already feel like they've accomplished a lot. They have a lot of what they want, and they feel like I shouldn't be ingrateful for what I have, but I just have a sense that there's something more. And I think so often what that comes down to is this feeling of like, because we are so conditioned in our culture and in our society to be people pleasers and to make choices based on what we think others expect or want from us. And I think we get to be midlife and you start to look around and go, there's so many things I want, or there's so many things about me that haven't come to fruition because I've been sort of appeasing what I see as the expectations of everybody else, and not elevating and allowing those parts of myself to really come through. So I think more often what I hear is, I'm grateful for what I have. I've made the choices I have. I accept them, but I know there's more to who I am and to what I could do and to who I want to be in the world.
Yeah. I mean, gratitude and struggle can always coexist. This is the
Yes.
big, I talk about this frequently with anyone and everyone that will listen, but it is a great point. It's like, yes, I am so eternally, endlessly grateful for the things that I have. I'm going through a shift right now of, I just left the corporate world, things were not aligning, and that can feel really scary. And I think a lot of us may stay on the train tracks that we're on for a lot longer than we would like to, because it's working, quote unquote, like you're
Yeah.
functioning, things are okay. So how do you work with folks that may have that fear of, I'm about to uproot everything? I am about to like F
Mhm.
SHIT up, like I'm
Yeah.
about to blow things up. How can you instead encourage people to use that as fuel rather than this like very big fear thing of, this potentially could go awry? Because
Mhm.
that's my big thing right now, is like, oh, I'm a little terrified of that. This was working. It's
Mhm.
not anymore. I'm trying to push through those fears right now. So how do you use that as fuel instead of just fear?
hmm Yeah, it's a great question. And it's so common, I think. And it's also the reason that a lot of people don't act at all because of that fear, right? So what I would say is the blow up, the big thing, the big ultimate change is what happens down the road. And the way to it is through small steps. And those small steps aren't so scary. So if you can break that big change down into incremental goals and then start with, I always use this analogy of like you're trying to cross a river, like you're out in the backcountry and you need to get across a river, and you can't quite see a clear way across. But if you just step out to the first stone, then you can resurvey the scene and see what next stone makes sense, and ultimately you find your way across, right? So I think a lot of times people see across the river and they're so afraid to try to get there without a plan, or it's so different from what they know that they are paralyzed with fear about trying to get there. But just getting stone by stone, one step at a time, towards that larger goal, I think can really alleviate some of that fear, because they're just little things, right? They're just little achievable incremental steps, and then you start to get some momentum, and you start to get some more confidence, and you start to get some more trust and in yourself, and in your faith and your ability and your capacity to keep moving forward. So I think not focusing so much in the moment on the big change that's out on the horizon, but rather breaking that into little smaller incremental steps and just focusing on getting to the first one, and then
Mhm.
just doing that again to get to
Yeah.
the next one, right?
Over and over. Yes.
Yeah.
And then I
Yeah.
think within that, you've mentioned this too, is not being afraid to pivot and course correct and
Yes.
figure out as things evolve. I mean, if you take your own pregnancy and mothering journey yourself, like the end state is those goals, those big goals that you have
Mhm.
for yourself and your family and the mother you want to be. But you're every day having to take those incremental and small steps to get there, and breaking it down, I think is really, really helpful, but also not being scared to say, okay, I thought this would work. Maybe it's not. Let's pivot.
Yeah.
Let's course correct. Um,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
that's a huge piece of that's what I struggle with personally, of like, but I was going to do it this way. I'm
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
type A, but that pivoting, I think, is really important to ultimately be the change. And do you find that a lot of people have an end state or an end goal that they think they want, and then through working with you, it's not actually anything what they wanted or what they thought they wanted?
Yes, absolutely. And also, the other side of that spectrum is a lot of people have an end goal. And then, so in the process that I use in my coaching programs, is, we really create a clear vision of where it is you want to go, what the destination looks like, and how you're going to know when you get there. What are the indicators of your arrival? And then we come back and assess current status in relationship to where you want to be. And the assessment of your current status can be painful, because you can
Mhm.
realize just how far away you are. But something that happens way more often than people expect is they go, "Oh, I'm actually already really close to being,"
Mhm.
like, you start really looking around and really taking stock, and you go, "I'm actually not that far from where," or "I'm actually here. I'm actually already there. It looks a little different than in my vision of the future, but I'm getting the things I want. I'm getting the things I needed. I'm feeling the way I wanted to feel." So I would say just as often as people's vision changing during the process, it happens that people realize that they're a lot closer to where they want to be than they thought they were.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's just a lot of internal work and evaluating what we think versus what we know. And as you very well know, life is very unpredictable, and we have to sort of roll with those things that come at us. So when there is a challenge or a stopgap, or someone's like working in these incremental steps and something seems to come to an absolute halt, what are some of the ways that you recommend or work with them to either move around it, through it, past it, over it? Like, how does that look in terms of process on your end?
Yeah, I actually, before I got on with you today, I was recording a lesson for one of my programs about overcoming resistance. And I think I think one really important thing is to stop and acknowledge that resistance, whether it's your own internal resistance or any external resistance that you might be experiencing, which is really common both the internal and the external are common when you embark on any new path, right? You're going to find new sources of resistance.
Always fun.
Yeah, you might find new, sources of fonts of resistance, inside yourself. But the first thing is a reframe, is to really understand that resistance is an opportunity, for that there's something there that you either need to learn or some new skills that you need to obtain in order to make a new kind of progress. And when you can see it as an opportunity or as a signal, you can actually see that you're on track, that you're on course, right? I mean, part of why we don't make change is because we don't experience enough resistance to need
Hmm.
to make change. And so we're comfortable in those tracks, right? And it can be hard to get out of them. So I think when you encounter resistance like that, it's really good to remind yourself, this is good. This means I'm on a new track, and it's hard. But it means I'm moving in a new direction, and I need to learn some new skills, or I need to equip myself with some new tools, whether those tools are learning how to communicate what I'm doing better, so, or in a new way, so that the people around me can understand better potentially, or understand me in a new way, learn how to tell my own story, learn to advocate for myself better, so that I can really, you know, help those around me to be facilitators of my journey rather than being resistant to my journey.
I love that. Reframe, be a facilitator of my
Yeah,
journey instead of a resistor. That's
yeah.
incredible.
And the same for yourself, right? So just if you're feeling internally resistant, to just that pause and think about, what is going on here for me? You know, a lot of times, particularly for women, again, and of course, this is a um, gender stereotype, but it tends to be the case that we diminish our own internal capacity. So when I was in college, I took this class called the psychology of sex differences. And I remember one of the things that we talked about in that class was that there had been studies conducted, and that young boys were more likely to externalize blame for things that didn't go well for them, and internalize the pride when things did go right. So if they did well on
Mm,
a test, they'd say, yeah, it's because I'm really smart. I know what I'm doing. If they didn't do well, they'd say the test was poorly written. Whereas girls, if they did well, would say the test was written really easy, and
mm.
they just didn't do a good job writing it. And if they don't do well, saying, I'm just not very smart. I don't do a very good job. So all of that to say that I think we grow up thinking, we can, in a very stereotypical way, as women, grow up internalizing the things that don't go well, or and seeing those as a reflection of who we are, and sort of, that can manifest in our internal dialogue. So I think encountering that resistance, taking it as an opportunity to stop and think, what is going on here for me? Am I blocking myself in some way? And how can I rescript my internal conversations and utilize new tools to get past whatever, blocks I might be self-imposing?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like the majority of mine are self-imposed. I don't know if you experience a higher percent of them being self-imposed versus externally imposed.
Yeah.
I feel like it's definitely a big one. And I come from like the data, big data, identity, marketing world. And so I try to frame it as that, as like a data point of,
Mhm.
okay, this is just feedback. What's this data telling me? How can we use that? But what I even think is so interesting is we all experience, so take motherhood journey, for example. We're going to experience roadblocks within motherhoods, but ours could also be extremely different. Like what your roadblocks are could even be like medical community wise versus
Mhm.
what mine are. It's a very different conversation. But if we all just sat down and had these open dialogues with the willingness to listen to someone else, I think we all realize we're a lot more similar than we think. And we're a
Mhm.
lot more aligned and can actually help each other. So within your programs and communities, are you also offering the ability for other women to connect with each other as well as one-on-one? And is that something that's you've seen really take off and build into
Yeah.
something?
Yes, absolutely. So all of my courses have a community element, right, where women can connect with one another. I always recommend, and in the case of one of my programs, require that women in my program connect with an accountability partner, just one person who they can, because whether you're working with me or anyone else, every coaching program or every online course has its own vernacular for one thing. So it sort of has its own little world. And to work with another person who's using the same language and thinking about things in a similar way and working towards whatever it is they're working towards using the same process. Plus, they've been drawn to the same program that you have been. So that indicates a commonality in terms of what, maybe looking for similar things in the world. Having a partner like that to do the work with, both the logistical work and also the sort of emotional work, I think is really valuable. And I actually met someone who's now a dear friend in an online course that I took because we became accountability partners. And I think it can go hand in hand with the fact that it's also very hard to make deep new connections with people at this stage of life.
Mm-hmm.
We find ourselves in college where it's really easy. You're living in a dorm together.
Forced.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, circumstantial. I mean, but in this phase of life, it's very hard. We're also, and especially for women like me who are starting motherhood at this phase of life, that's very isolating. So I think, that can be a really wonderful opportunity to connect with people who meet you where you are now, which is very different than friendships you might have made earlier in life that have lasted so yeah, I think that can be I think meeting people in the context of a program like that,
Yes.
and then working with others in that context as sort of a source of accountability for you and an opportunity for you to serve as an accountability partner to someone else can really complement the learning and the journey.
Yeah. Or just to have someone to say, am I insane? Like, am I going
Yeah,
crazy? Like, what is
yeah.
happening here? And I think it's also really important. And I love that you have that element of it is someone can love you so, so, so much and simply not understand
Oh
what
yeah,
you're going through, whether it be becoming a mom at 46, whether it be going through infertility. None of my friends had experienced that. They didn't know how to handle me. And
yeah,
some people that I've become very dear friends with, like you said, you've become with someone that was in a program with you, letting go of those expectations of she's been my friend for 25 years. Like, why isn't she understanding me? Because she can't.
yeah.
So find these communities and don't be afraid to utilize other people who are going through it as well. Because a lot of times, like my mother couldn't understand me. She didn't experience the same things I did. So I love that you have a community aspect to it because it brings such peace. For
Mhm.
people to say, like, you get it. Oh my gosh, thank God you get it. You get it. I don't have to explain myself. You're
Yeah.
just there. So
It can also be a really wonderful exercise in expanding your own horizons. In
Mhm.
this midlife mamas group that I started on Facebook, there's now a little sort of pod of us who live close to each other in the Northwest, and we get together regularly. We're actually planning a mama's getaway in next
Nice.
month. Yeah. And, we come from different walks of life. The thing that we have in common, the common denominator is we all became moms later in life, but we are not women who likely would have been drawn to each other in our younger years. We are very different, but we have that thing in common. And that thing is so big and comes with it such a unique set of challenges and opportunities that it's a major foundation for a relationship between
Mhm.
us. And what it has done for me, and I hope for others in our little circle, is it's opened my eyes to my own capacity to become close to people who are different from me, who have different political viewpoints, who have different sort of backgrounds and social status and economic status. And I think that's really meaningful and worthwhile. And that can be something that, again, it's one of those things where you get stuck in your routine and you're not exposing yourself to new points of view and new sources of information. And so, I really see that as an opportunity to connect with people who are different and
Yeah.
to connect around something that you have in common that enough to bind you and to give you a common ground. But um, to where you're different enough also that you can really learn something.
Yeah. I think the more people, the merrier. I think this is why I started this
Yeah.
show is just being able to listen to someone with an experience I don't have. It's valuable and it's amazing. And
Yeah.
I so appreciate anyone that takes the time to sit down with me. I'm fascinated by human beings. So it's just such a treat for me. But where can people find your programs and find you if you want to give the shout out there? And I'll make sure to link up everything in the show notes as well if you want to talk about your offerings and where they can be found.
Yeah, so I am on Instagram and I'm newly minted on TikTok, but I don't really have anything there right now. But on Instagram as midlife.mama, and it's MAMA. So midlife.mama, midlife mama. And then my website, I have two websites. One is midlife.mom, not .com, .mom.
That's so fun.
And the other one is just my name with a hyphen. So it's Natasha-Dworkin.com. And that's where all of my coaching and courses and programs live.
Amazing.
And then for anyone who is also a midlife mom, so someone who became a parent, and this is inclusive of people who adopted or became foster parents or became step parents over the age of 35. I invite anyone who falls into that camp to join my Facebook community, which is Midlife Mamas.
And that's all on Facebook.
Yeah, that's on Facebook. Cool. Yeah. Yeah.
They're amazing. All right. I will link up everything in the show notes as well. Natasha, you are such a wonderful, beautiful soul. And the work you are doing is incredible and it touches the lives of many. Check out Natasha. You can also let me know if you're a midlife mom yourself, if you've just learned something, keep us posted. And Natasha, I just so appreciate you sitting down and taking the time with me today. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I feel like we could keep talking for the rest of the episode.
I know. I just want to be mindful of your time and episode time and everything. But this has been incredible. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Take care, Sarah.
Thank you for tuning in to the Welcome to My 10 podcast. I hope you had as much fun listening as I do recording. I am so happy to have you here and see you next episode.